The planet is heating up.
The oceans are becoming filled with plastic.
Change starts now. Change starts now.
We're on a countdown
To zero waste. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Zero Waste Countdown Podcast. Here's your host, Laura Nash.
Hi, Sarah. It's Laura Nash calling from the Zero Waste Countdown. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. This is awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, Sarah, you're the head of the Oceans and Plastic campaign at Greenpeace. Is that right?
Yeah, Greenpeace Canada.
Cool. How long have you been in this role?
I have been in this role for about 2 years, but I've been working on oceans at Greenpeace for about 12 years now.
Oh, wow. Awesome. That's a long time. And you're in Vancouver, is that right?
I am, yeah.
So this is a very, very important issue for me, oceans and plastic. And it's been a while since we've focused on the oceans for an episode. So we've had some scientists come on the show and talk about microfibers and BPA. And we had a filmmaker come on. I don't know if you've heard of Julia Barnes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's great. So she came on and was telling us, you know, the fish stocks are like almost 90% depleted and we don't see these big fish anymore that we used to see because they're all smaller. And there's just so much plastic and trash in the ocean and we definitely need to do something about it. And Greenpeace is well on its way to helping. So before we get into the plastics campaign and what it's really about and kind of what you do, I'm wondering if we can just go back to Greenpeace and start at the beginning. There is a documentary, I can't remember the name of it, but it kind of shows where like Greenpeace and Captain Paul Watson kind of split ways, but they used to be one group.
Yeah. So Greenpeace actually started in Vancouver in 1971, and it formed out of this small group of people who were originally protesting nuclear tests in the North Pacific. And that group, at the time, they called themselves the Don't Make a Wave Committee because, you know, they didn't want nuclear testing to be done in the ocean. And from that, through more protests that they did, they named one of their boats, Greenpeace. And sort of from that, the organization kind of became what we know it as today. But yeah, I mean, it really started as a people-powered movement that's grown. And now, you know, we're found in over 40 countries.
And there's a really big program that's starting too, where I think there's some ships going from the North Pole to the South Pole, or maybe it's one ship with Greenpeace?
Yeah, it's a really exciting campaign. It's called, the Protect the Oceans campaign, and that's our pole-to-pole ship tour. So we're starting in the Arctic and we're ending in the Antarctic. Basically, we want to highlight the various threats that the oceans are facing. And then we also want to highlight the amazing biodiversity and the beautiful ecosystems that are worth protecting. And what we're trying to do through this global campaign is put pressure on governments at the UN to create a global ocean treaty. And this treaty would help create a mechanism to allow us to protect the high seas areas. So the high seas areas are the parts of the ocean that are beyond a country's national waters. Mm-hmm. And right now, it's very hard to protect those parts of the ocean, but that's where, you know, so much of the destruction is happening, but also so much of the marine life travels and feeds and breeds. And so we're really trying to get 30% of those high seas areas protected by 2030. And we need this global ocean treaty to actually do that.
Mm-hmm. When I joined the Navy, I thought that as a Navy, we'd be doing more to protect the oceans, but we weren't really doing that much, to be honest. So,
no, yeah,
it's strange to me that we need to have organizations that are, you know, not-for-profits that are doing this work, which I kind of feel personally that our country should be doing it a little bit more. But you're right, there is this economic zone around countries, and we're kind of only able to protect that part. Like in Canada, there's this area around Canada. Do you remember what it is? I think it's like 200 miles, maybe? out to sea.
Nautical miles. Yeah.
And then otherwise, it's just international waters. But some bad things are happening with overfishing and people dumping and even us in the Navy. Like, I would see the cook dump buckets of food out with all the plastic still attached, like, little plastic wrappers or, yogurt containers and stuff. And I know there's a cruise ship line that kind of got in trouble for doing that a little while ago. So it's good. I think this is great to get more awareness about those areas that really do need to be protected. But you're also doing a campaign too, the Break Free from Plastic campaign.
Yeah, so the Break Free from Plastic is it's a global movement of around 1,500 organizations that are all working together, trying to push for massive reduction in single-use plastic production. So all the different organizations work on a bunch of different angles of the issue, but generally everyone's trying to stop this problem at the source, which is the production, as opposed to sort of focusing on, once all this plastic is created, then what do we do with it? So Greenpeace is one of the member organizations. And we have a global campaign where we're trying to get major corporations to essentially ditch single-use plastics, to move away from their reliance on that type of packaging and single-use items, and move instead towards product delivery models that are more based on reuse and refill and aren't so, disposal centric. And then we're also trying to get governments to ban these products. Many of them are very toxic. They're regularly found in the environment, as I'm sure, most people that have taken a walk in a community park or along a shoreline. I mean, it's almost impossible now to be in a green space and not see some plastic item.
Right.
So we're really trying to get governments to ban the most problematic and unnecessary single-use plastics.
Mm-hmm. I don't like a whole bunch of government intervention, but I think it's time, because you're right. Anywhere you go nowadays, it doesn't matter what country you're in or where you are, you just see litter everywhere, and it's such a big problem. So is that the campaign that you're working on, or do you have other campaigns that you're working on? Yeah,
so we're part of that larger umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And in Canada, we've narrowed in on a few areas. So through these beach cleanups and brand audits that we did last year. So instead of like the normal beach cleanup where you collect the trash and sometimes you weigh the trash or do audits on the types of trash, we took it one step further and looked at all of the plastic waste and then identified the companies or the brands that were behind all of that pollution. And then we compiled the information from our various locations across the country, and we came up with the top 5 polluters in Canada. So a big part of our work in Canada is to put pressure on those companies to try to change their ways. And also one of the top 5 polluters, Nestle, we also have a global campaign targeting them because they're the world's largest food and beverage producer. As you can imagine, they produce billions and billions of single-use plastic packaged goods. And so we're also trying to encourage them to move in the right direction. Then we also are trying to focus on our supermarkets, which is where most people see the plastic problem and try to figure out a way to navigate it. But it's very, very hard for folks to avoid plastic packaging. So we're also trying to get the big supermarket chains in Canada. And it's been amazing. We've already had over 120,000 people sign a petition directed at the big retailers in Canada. So there's so much interest in the retail sector and trying to get them to move away from all their ridiculous packaging. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, the government of Canada has been in the process for a long time. Well, not for a long time, actually, for like a year and a half of putting together a national strategy on how to tackle plastic waste and pollution. So we've been encouraging them to have bans be a big part of that strategy, and also, extended producer responsibility, so holding corporations accountable, encouraging them to invest in alternative delivery systems that are more, as I said, focused on reuse and refill models. And so unfortunately, so far, the strategy has been really weak, and, it's way too focused on false solutions. So that's another big piece of our work, is we're really trying to get the government to take a strong stand and basically act in a way that reflects the urgency of the situation.
Good. Yeah, Catherine McKenna has been on the show, and she did mention that there were some programs coming out, and it's good, but it needs to be a little bit more, I think. And I think the bans are the way to go because they have been successful in some other countries. We had someone come on the show from Sri Lanka who said that there was a ban, a plastic bag ban there, and no one was really paying attention to it because there weren't any penalties really for it and it wasn't being enforced. But then you look at Kenya, who has a very, very steep penalty, and they do enforce it, and so then it works, right? So I hope that Canada gets on this and does it right. So you mentioned that Nestle was the top polluter. Did you say in the world and in Canada?
In several countries, I think it's in like 42 countries, Nestle popped up as one of the top 3 polluters.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but in Canada, yes, they were the number 1 polluter.
Interesting. You know what? Someone told me the other day that a lot of sit-down restaurants actually get their food from Nestle, and they get them in like little packages. So Nestle will package food in these little packages, and then when you order it at a restaurant, they will like heat those packages up and put them on your plate. I don't know if you know anything about that. Yeah. And I think it's probably black plastic too, but I don't know too much. So I don't know if that's true or if that's what they're doing. I won't say the restaurant. But yeah, I've heard that that kind of stuff is happening as well, because I try and eat, if I'm going to eat out at a restaurant, I'll try and go somewhere where I can sit down. So then I know that I'm not going to get it served in styrofoam or plastic or anything like that. But then sometimes I wonder what's going on upstream in the whole process.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I actually, I had a similar experience. Well, yeah, at Starbucks where I was like in an airport, you know, desperate for a muffin or something. And I saw Starbucks. And in the past, you know, all the food that you would order would be in the display case, and they'd take it from the display case and put it on your plate. And then this one time I was there and I ordered a muffin or something, and I saw them take a clear plastic, like a muffin in a clear plastic thing out of a fridge or something, like take it out of the plastic, throw the plastic out, and then they warmed it up. And I was like, wow, okay, so every single thing in this case that's so nicely displayed, not in plastic, actually is all individually wrapped in plastic. And customers don't know that unless they're standing there kind of watching their food be given. And that was a new development. I mean, it hasn't always been like that. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to avoid. It really is. Like, you know, even if you ask for, say, a bit of peanut butter, if you go for brunch somewhere, or, you know, you go for breakfast, often you'll be given one of those little packets or something. And it's, hard to avoid.
So Nestle was the worst in Canada. I'm a little surprised because I thought maybe Tim Hortons would have been the thing we'd find most on beaches and like roadways and stuff. Were they second?
Yeah. They were second.
Yeah.
A very close race. And, you know, some of it just, we did 6 locations across Canada. And I'm sure if we did another 6, you know, maybe Tim Hortons would show up more in certain locations, and that would tip the scale. I mean, we definitely found that some locations over other Tim Hortons was higher up. And then in other locations, you know, they weren't. It just sort of depends, I think, on, you know, what are the businesses in the areas and stuff like that. But unfortunately, Tim Hortons is, I would say, our most iconic trash in Canada. I mean, you can't go anywhere really without seeing a Timmy Ho cup driving down the highway, you know, in a park, on the beach. I mean, it's everywhere. And yeah, like it's a shame because the company, in my view, could really use its brand power and customer loyalty to really innovate in, you know, in new ways of distributing their products to consumers that are like not so reliant on those throwaway cups.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder what the hockey player would have thought if his restaurant chain, you know, because he's a hockey player, he's a Canadian icon. I'm sure he was a really good guy. And then his coffee shop has turned into the second biggest polluter of trash across the country. And I just sometimes wonder about that. I wish that they had a little machine so that a few months ago when I was still drinking coffee, I could just run in and fill up my cup and tap my card or my phone and then just get out of there instead of waiting in the line or going through the drive-thru or anything if something was just a little bit easier for people who had their own mugs. But they do give a discount, actually, I think. I think it's like a 10-cent discount or something. And they will fill up cups, whereas I've been to McDonald's who will not fill up your own coffee cup. They won't touch it. So, there's a lot of work that they can do. So I'm really glad that you're working on this. And are there other campaigns that you are running as well, other than so you've got the Break Free from Plastic, and then I'm not sure if you were involved in the Pole to Pole, or is that just sort of the international project?
So we are supporting that global campaign, and so one of the legs of the ship tour is in the Sargasso Sea. So the Sargasso Sea is in the Atlantic. It's kind of like off the southeast of the U.S., and it's a really amazing sea. It has these like floating forests where like little sea turtles, like to hang out. But yeah, unfortunately, it's, like I'm sure folks have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the North Pacific Gyre, where trash accumulates. Well, the Sargasso Sea, it's kind of it's like the Atlantic Ocean equivalent. It's like a similar area where plastic accumulates. And so unfortunately, a lot of, the floating habitat actually is being like contaminated by plastic waste. And so the ship tour is going to go there and document what's happening. And we hope to be involved in that in some way. But otherwise, we are sharing the stories. We are trying to encourage the Canadian government to vote in favor of the Global Oceans Treaty. And we're encouraging Canadians to call for protection in the high seas.
I just had this idea because when I was in the Navy, I didn't think we really did that much. So we would go down to Op Carib and we would take part in America's war on drugs, which is not our war. And we just legalized marijuana. So I don't think Canadians are really that supportive of supporting America's war on drugs. But anyway, that was one of the only missions we would do. And then we would send another ship over to what we called the Box, which was in the Gulf of Aden. So we'd try and have a ship over there all the time. And otherwise, as a Canadian Navy, we would just be sailing around hosting cocktail parties for dignitaries like around the world, doing these around the world legs. And if you put a frigate up to top speed for an hour, you're going to burn about 10,000 liters of fuel. So it's a big fossil fuel footprint, basically, to do that. And so perhaps then if the Canadian government was more inclined to help on the high seas to regulate the ocean and to make sure that, there's not illegal fishing and dumping and all that stuff, then maybe our Navy would have a better role in the world to help those things because, we're not really doing a whole lot. But we have the ships and we have the men and the women and the, everyone that's in there. They're there and they're waiting to sail.
That would be great. We definitely, that's the reality of like our lawless high seas. It's so hard to, enforce and get eyes on what's going on out there. Yeah, it would be amazing if, more countries took ownership, or not literal ownership, but stepped up and played a role in that.
Yeah, and I hope in our Arctic too, because if the Northwest Passage does open, I keep waiting for it to be more and more open. But so Stephen Harper promised we would have a deep sea port in Nanisivik by 2014. And we never did. And my concern way back then was we need to have some sort of presence up there to make sure that, people aren't being smuggled into the country. And we have to make sure that people aren't doing really bad things up there. What if people are going and dumping, or we're not really regulating or like taking care of our waters? Like I wish we had more of a presence up there, but maybe more of a presence would mean more bad things would happen. I don't know.
Yeah, that's always the toss up. I mean, because large ships also, have impacts on migration routes of species, and ship strikes with whales is a growing problem. And so that's the thing. It's like also maybe we should just leave. Well, this is what we want to see in our call for protection of 30% of the high seas. Is like some areas should just really be left alone. It's hard to know how to approach also such a massive area too. It's not like just one ocean. It's all the oceans. So no small task.
Yeah, because I was hoping we'd have more people up there, but with more people comes more garbage and more fossil fuels are needed and stuff like that, right? When you start to think about it. So yeah, you're right. If some areas are just left protected, but then you need someone to protect them. It's so much to think about when you start opening the can of worms of how to how to do the right thing. But you were mentioning the beach cleanups with Greenpeace. So when you guys are cleaning up all this stuff and you do the trash audits and whatnot, are you recycling what you can and then do you incinerate the rest, or what do you do with everything that you pick up?
Yeah, so actually a lot of it gets used for the creative confrontations that we do. Well, most recently, we did a global day of action focused on Nestle, and people all around the world created these massive plastic monsters made out of largely Nestle trash that have been created during cleanups. So often we use them in those kind of visual protests or in sculptures, installations, those types of things. We often return it to companies. So we do return a sender kind of things, being like, we found this and this is yours.
Wow.
So you should take it back. We use it, but in displays, like if we're doing public awareness events, we bring it to show kind of like the different kinds of pollution, plastic pollution that we're finding in the environment. So whatever's left over, we do recycle what we can. But unfortunately, once a lot of the stuff ends up in the environment, it's too contaminated, or like it's not in a state that it's accepted, a lot of it, in the recycling system. So yeah, it has to go to landfill. And this kind of shows just how much of it really is just trash at the end of the day. We have these high hopes of, that bottle I bought or whatever, like it says it can be recycled, so I'm going to put it in my bin and then it's going to get recycled. And, I think now increasingly we're all learning that just isn't the reality. Unfortunately, a lot of it goes to landfill. Yeah.
But it's better than being in the ocean where it's damaging animals directly, right?
Yeah.
So
totally.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, in a lot of communities across Canada, but, around the world, cleanups are a necessity now. Like, it's so much trash in some areas is rolling in on the waves. In some areas, like I did a massive cleanup and brand audit in the Philippines, and the trash literally did roll in on the waves every day. And so to some extent, cleaning it up, is pointless because you would just be there for the rest of time cleaning up as it came in. But at the same time, you want to try to make a dent in it and try to remove some of that trash from these areas for any wildlife that, didn't get the memo that there's massive plastic pollution in that area and that they come. It's really sad just how so many habitats and so many communities are just being, are just drowning in plastic, basically.
It's terrible, yeah. In 2010, so quite a while ago, I was hiking the North Coast Trail on Vancouver Island, so really close to you. Have you done that trail?
Yeah, I love that one.
Nice. Yeah, it's beautiful. I don't know if this is the same or if you saw this, but in 2010, there were Japanese water bottles everywhere. And they were hundreds of them that were all washed up. So I don't know if a container spilled or if they're just washing right over from Japan, because I know the currents come directly kind of from Japan over to BC. But that was a big wake up call for me that things are traveling on the currents.
Yeah. Yes, totally. Yeah. I mean, because of our proximity to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and that gyre, often it sort of burps out plastic and it makes its way to our shores on the west coast here. The tsunami also played a role in that because it brought a lot more trash into the ocean when that happened in Japan. But yeah, I mean, it's true. You can find plastic from a bunch of different parts of the world sometimes, depending on where you are. But yeah, I mean, definitely finding in Canada that more and more it is just the well-known brands that we have in the country. And so whether the trash is being transported to waterways in the ocean through wind or storm drains or, just leakage through transport or overflowing garbage cans on a windy day, whatever it is, increasingly beach cleanups across Canada are yielding higher numbers. And it's kind of the usual suspects in those findings.
We did a beach cleanup here on the North Shore of Lake Ontario, and we found a really big number of balloons. And they weren't like the household balloons you get really for like a party, like those rubbery ones. They were more so the ones, and I think they're Mylar, but they're like the shiny balloons.
Right.
And they all had their strings on them. So we were kind of trying to dig out the strings. They were wrapped around sticks. Like it must have been, I imagine that they would wrap around some animals and do some damage that way. But yeah, really surprised by the amount of balloons that were washed up there.
Yeah, I found a lot of those as well. And yeah, it's so grim. I mean, obviously balloons are so fun, but the helium ones out in the outside is just, it's always a bad idea. Inevitably, one of them lets go. I think there are some jurisdictions, I can't remember, that are considering not allowing people to have them outside anymore. But yeah, it's a hard one.
That would be nice.
It's a hard one to be the fun police when it comes to
my
balloons.
Gosh. Yeah. My kid wasn't too excited when I told him we couldn't have balloons for his birthday, but we put a giant dinosaur toy that he's had on the mailbox, and I was like, "Look how nice this looks," and so I think he was okay with it.
Yeah, that's great.
But I think that our world has this addiction to convenience and overconsumption. I think we all have this collective addictions if you look at it in a certain way. So in your vision, how do you see us as basically an entire species? Because this plastic problem is everywhere. How do you see us getting away from so much single-use plastic?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely nailed it there with, our obsession with convenience, and we need things now, and then we need to not deal with it. And we have become such sort of a rushed and thing and stuff obsessed cumulative society. Obviously not everyone's like that, and some parts of the world are worse than others, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, we really, 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 really need to break this disposal-centric system that we operate in, where corporations are just allowed to pump out, billions and billions and billions of toxic polluting products with zero consequences. And we need governments to hold them accountable and start instead supporting this growing movement of people who are saying, enough is enough to this plastic nightmare. We want to go back to a sort of a simpler time. And I think it really is about the need to simplify our lives, get back to a time when we weren't so stuff obsessed, and there wasn't so much choice, and happiness wasn't measured against things, and convenience wasn't all about having it now, but more about you have something for a long time, or, you always have the things you need. That's more of a definition of convenience. It's definitely, I would say, such a complex question that I think so many people around the world right now, whether they're working on this issue or they're dealing with the onslaught of plastic in their daily lives, and they're feeling frustrated and sad with the photos that they're seeing. I think so many people are how do we get out of this mess? But yeah, I think we just need to slow down and just think about convenience in a different way. And I don't mean, when I say we, I don't mean us as consumers only. It really is this, the global we, and corporations are really the ones driving these stories that we've been told about. These are the products to have. This is the way they should come. Yeah, the power of marketing really has played a huge role in kind of us getting here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As a consumer, even if you're just trying to go get your groceries, depending on where you live, in Vancouver, we have a lot of options to go to zero waste stores, go to farmers markets, go to bulk stores. There are a lot of options, but depending on where you live, the only grocery store that you have may be sort of like a big Loblaw or Superstore, or, a Sobeys or a Walmart. And I challenge anyone to shop zero waste in those. I mean, it's impossible. So even despite people's best efforts to avoid plastic, to do the right thing, to try to recycle, you take it away from it. And why? It's because corporations are packaging everything, all of our daily necessities, the food, our personal care products, everything is coming in it. Not everyone has the time or the means to really search out, how to avoid it. And people shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't be on all of us to do 8 million things to avoid plastic, when the simple solution is just, let's just not produce it in the first place because it's causing all this chaos.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's really unfair that I feel like I do a ton of work, honestly, to avoid garbage. It's sometimes exhausting. But you've been working here for years and years. So how did you get involved in Greenpeace and this whole zero waste stuff?
Well, after my schooling, I really wanted to like work at an NGO, but I had no experience. And, you know, in Canada, I'd obviously heard of all the major environmental organizations like Greenpeace and Sierra Club and Suzuki Foundation and all those. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll start by doing an internship. But at the time, I think just because of sort of when I was trying to apply, I'd missed the deadlines for some of them. And then other organizations like Greenpeace Canada didn't have internship programs at that time. And then I came across one in the U.S. office in D.C., a posting, and it was on oceans issues, which I had just been studying salmon farms and their impacts. And I was like, yes, I want this. So I applied and I ended up getting the job. And so I lived in D.C. for 3 months, doing sort of like an intensive internship. And then from there I got hired on by the U.S. office for a little bit and then by the Canadian office. And then since then I've been working in Vancouver. But yeah, I mean, I actually started as a Greenpeace supporter. I was living in Toronto and one of the street canvassers approached me and I was like, yes, I do want to donate. I didn't have much to donate at the time because I was a student, but I was like, yes. So I've always like had a love for the organization. And then once I started to work for Greenpeace, I fell even more in love. And here we are a long time later.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I know a lot of our listeners are currently in university, so it's nice to hear stories like you of when you get out and then you get a good job that really matters and that's doing good things. So it's always nice to see the path where people end up going. So are there things that you do in your daily life to live zero waste?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've tried for a long time to like reduce my overall impact. But definitely, you know, with a focus on waste, I tried my hardest, but it, you know, as others find, it's not easy. And I used to travel a fair amount for work too. And it's even more of a nightmare, when you're trying to travel. Yeah. But yeah, no, I do, you know, I do the usual, like bring my own mugs and bags and, containers if, you know, if I'm going somewhere where that's necessity. I buy my groceries in bulk and unpackaged as much as possible. Same with my personal care products, the refill toothpaste that you talk about, do that, and my shampoo. And I've learned to make various things over the years. Like I make my own oat or nut or rice milk and eat mainly a plant-based diet, which helps to cut out a lot. And actually just the other night I learned how to make vegan yogurt, which was really exciting.
Oh my gosh, tell me, because I make regular yogurt. How do you do that?
So this one is a oat cashew with a little bit of like coconut flake base. And then you use probiotics. It's surprisingly really simple and it's really, really delicious. And then of course you're not like spending a ton of money on vegan yogurt, which is way more expensive, and B, you're avoiding the plastic packaging. So yeah, I'm so excited to try it. I haven't made my first batch because I just learned like literally 2 nights ago. I'm really excited. So yeah, I try to find things that I can make. And then just, you know, like just getting comfortable with saying no to things. I think that's one of the biggest things. It's huge. Like, no, I don't want that. Yeah. Like I don't want that straw with that, or no, I don't want that random thing that you're giving out at this event, or no, I don't want the cutlery on the airplane. It's getting comfortable with saying no and like feeling good about that. And then often explaining why, which is helping to like share, you know, with businesses and establishments, like why you're making the choice that you make.
Yeah. It's funny in Canada and the US, we're so used to pleasantries. So, hi, how are you? Thank you, like these things. But when you actually get into conversations with people, it almost seems like it's becoming taboo or something, because I remember when I started taking my own containers, Like I must have looked like that cat from Puss in Boots when looked with the big wide eyes and like the ears folded back, holding up my container, being like, will you take this and put my fish in it or my olives or whatever? And then some people would say like no and be rude about it, or some people would be nice, or some people would be really confused. But it's hard to engage people in those weird conversations sometimes. I'm used to it now. I can do it just fine, but I do remember it being weird. So
totally so weird.
Yeah. So that is
yeah,
a big
I know
part.
that look well. Like you want me to put this in there, but how do you even? Yeah, and it's a funny moment.
It is. Their wheels are turning inside their head. Like they, you can see them thinking and trying to figure out if they should say yes or no, or like, why am I doing this? Or is it wrong? Or is it right? Like you really put them on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if any listeners want to get involved with Greenpeace, they can donate, obviously, right? Right on the website?
Yeah. Yep.
And are there other ways to get involved in Greenpeace if people don't have the money to donate, but they might have some time or a skill or something?
Yeah, totally. If you go to the website, greenpeace.ca, there's like a section that's called Act, and we have our different petitions there. We have other like action items that folks can do. There's also a place to sign up to volunteer. And on the plastics campaign, we actually have some cool things that'll be happening over the coming months. We're going to be doing a bunch more Beach Clean brand audits, hopefully, in different places. But if folks are particularly interested to do a brand audit in their hometown and want to know how to do that, with some friends, it would be great if they signed up, to volunteer. And then I think when you sign up, there's like a note maybe that says like, why are you interested? Or you can write something like that. But otherwise, yeah, you can follow along with our campaign through social media and on the website. And then there'll be more kind of like notices about when we plan to do these audits. More and more people are doing, when they go to the beach or whatever, they pick up trash, and we're seeing so many community cleanups pop up, which is great and both sad that they're necessary. But we've seen lots of even the really small organizations and groups of folks do brand audits. So we are trying to collect data from all across Canada and kind of use it to highlight, again, both who are the major contributors, but also kind of like what are we kind of seeing in different parts of the country, and kind of make a case for certain single-use items that are very regularly found, make a case for why certain jurisdictions should be focusing on those over others.
Right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. There's a trash bash that's this weekend in my community, and it's quite popular, and I'll definitely be out. I have a funny video of my kid pulling like a doll out of a swamp, and it's like a really creepy looking doll, like one you'd see in a horror movie. We found all sorts of weird things, but it would be really good to do one in our community, because then it really puts a name, not to a face, but, a name to the items that we're seeing. Because a lot of people think, oh, trash, I don't know. Like I have this system where it goes under my kitchen in a drawer, and then it goes out to my garage, and then it goes out to my driveway. And it's like, they don't know how to get rid of that system because it's been in place their whole lives. Right. So I think when you start seeing like, okay, on your street, there were this many Tim Hortons cups or something. And then maybe someone would think, oh, well, maybe I should bring my own cup. And then it works, right? So it's a great idea. So hopefully we can do that in my area too. I like it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And that's right on greenpeace.ca, right? To find out the tools for doing that?
Yeah, and so we have a toolkit for a plastic-free future, and it outlines a bunch of different ways that you can take action in your community, and brand audits are part of that. So there already is a how-to guide online. We're going to be updating that, and we're updating certain sections of the toolkit right now. Like the supermarket one, for example, like as I noted, there was such an overwhelming interest in trying to get supermarkets to reduce their plastic packaging. So we've created a toolkit for folks that want to go further and push their supermarkets to make change. So yeah, but folks can download our toolkit. I think it's greenpeace.ca/plastic, and reach out for sure if they want to lead an event of their own.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on our show and talking to us, and for all the work that you do with Greenpeace on the plastics project.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking to you.
If you like our show and want to help save the world from all this trash we're consuming, please consider donating to the Zero Waste Countdown. You can become a patron on Podbean, you can find me on Patreon, or you can donate right on the website, zerowastecountdown.com. And if you're interested in seeing a photo of our guests, you can check us out on Instagram. That's _waste_countdown. And if you want to email me, it's laura@zerowastecountdown.com. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thanks to all our listeners in America, Canada, Australia, Germany, the UK, and wherever else you may be tuning in from. Together, we're going to change the world.
Change starts now.
This is the Zero Waste Countdown Podcast.